What if the dead were stitched into unstoppable war machines? Hidden deep beneath the Mechanicus forge, a creature awakens. A body of flesh and metal, memories torn and fused into chaos. It doesn't know who it is, or what it's capable of. Every step shakes the tunnels. Every breath echoes terror. Will it escape, or become the ultimate weapon of the Imperium? Dive into the dark secrets where science and horror collide. The Dark Forge world had always been a place of grinding gears, hissing steam, and cold metallic chants, but on this forgotten night, its atmosphere felt tighter, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Deep beneath the surface, past layers of red-hot pipes and echoing manufactorums, a lone tech priest worked in a chamber that even his brothers avoided. He had sealed the doors himself, muttering Benhuric wards and plugging dozens of data cables into the walls, as though he feared the machine spirits might flee from what he was about to attempt. Flickering lumen strips cast long, jittering shadows across the room, illuminating a metal slab in the center one that was drenched with surgical fluids and surrounded by floating servo skulls humming quietly. The air smelled of oil, burnt incense, and the faint metallic tang of old blood. The creature on the slab was a towering patchwork of mismatched flesh and reinforced metal, stitched with lengths of black synth fiber that pulsed faintly with each diagnostic signal the tech priest injected. Some limbs were clearly human, scarred and pale, taken from battlefield corpses. Others came from ogrins or vat-grown brutes, their massive muscles fused to reinforced adamantium joints. The tech priest had grafted an entire mechanical spine into the creature's back, each vertebra a humming power cell feeding the organs that were never meant to live again. Dozens of cables, tubes, and cogitator arrays were embedded into its chest, ribs replaced with metal braces to hold together what nature had long allowed to rot. The tech priest whispered the litany of ignition, his voice a low mechanical rumble, each syllable accompanied by the click of internal gears. He adjusted the creature's skull, an oversized, reinforced cranium formed from a fusion of bone and metal plating. The face was the most disturbing part, a mosaic of fragments taken from different corpses, aligned with a careful but unnatural precision. A servo skull hovered nearby, projecting symbols and readings into the air, analyzing nerve connections and synaptic stability. The creature's eyes were milky gray, lifeless, but fitted with internal biolenses waiting for activation. He had spent months accumulating the corpses, months more stripping them down, cataloging each usable organ, repairing them with slick Mechanicus tools, and replacing whatever nature could not be forced to function. Every piece was chosen with intention, every muscle grafted with ritualistic precision, every bone fused with metal pins etched with runes. The tech priest considered his creation a masterpiece, something far beyond simple servitors or vat-grown soldiers. Those were crude tools, unworthy of the true genius of the Omnissiah. This was something more, something unique, something alive. The room pulsed with the thrum of generators as he activated the main power conduit. Sparks danced across the slabs of metal flooring. Thick cables rose like serpents from the ceiling, lowering until they latched into ports on the creature's spine and chest. The tech priest's mechadendrites moved like well-practiced limbs, flipping switches, adjusting valves, flooding the creature's veins with synthetic fluids and electrically charged nutrients. He monitored each reading carefully, his eyes flickering with streams of sacred data. The heartbeat monitor remained flat and silent. For a moment, he paused, his human hand one of the last remnants of his flesh trembling slightly. There was no logic in fear, no reason within the Mechanicus to feel nerves. Yet he could not help but recall the stories of magos who dared to play with the boundary between machine and life, only to lose themselves to madness or worse. He forcefully banished the thought with a burst of internal pain suppressants and reinitiated the activation sequence. The power surged. Electricity flooded the creature's body in violent arcs, jolting its limbs upward. Its chest heaved once, twice, then fell still. The lights flickered as overloaded circuits strained to maintain the flow. Servoskulls backed away as the air crackled with energy. A deep rumble echoed through the chamber, and the creature's limbs twitched again, this time with rhythm, not randomness. Its fingers curled, metal joints creaking. Its head turned slightly, the first sign of a nervous system reconnecting after death. The tech priest leaned in closer, recording every micro-movement. He noted the tremor in the left arm, the delayed response in the right leg, the stuttering pulse of the rebooting organs. He adjusted the power levels, whispering a prayer to soothe the protesting machine spirits. The creature's chest plate rose slowly, as though an ancient bellows were pushing stale air into long-dead lungs. There was no breath, not truly, but the movement was enough to suggest something had awakened. Then the eyes snapped open. What stared back was not human, nor was it the clean predictability of a servitor's blank gaze. It was something trapped, something confused, something too aware. The tech priest froze, his augmetic heart ticking faster. The data readouts spiked. Neural activity burst like wildfire across the displays, far beyond what he had calculated. The creature's fingers clawed at the restraints, not mechanically, not instinctively, desperately. It made a sound, a low, ragged groan, stitched with static from the half-functional vocal cords, but unmistakably alive. The tech priest stepped back as the restraints began to strain, metal bending under brute strength. He whispered an emergency right to the machine spirits, trying to stabilize the synapse feedback. For a moment, the creature stilled, eyes darting, muscles twitching as though it were trying to understand itself. Then the power level surged again. And something inside the creature, something that should not have existed, sparked into full awareness. Unstable minds were always the true danger in any experiment that tampered with life, but the minds inside these stitched-together giants were something far beyond what the tech priests had planned for. When the first creature's consciousness flickered awake, it wasn't a clean reboot like a machine starting no single pattern, no singular identity. Instead, it was as if dozens of dying thoughts, final screams, broken memories, and half-forgotten emotions all surged upward at once, colliding into each other inside a brain that had been forced into existence. The tech priest had predicted neural confusion, perhaps some violent spasms or cognitive instability, but nothing prepared him for the way the creature's eyes darted, focusing on things that weren't in the room. As if it were seeing multiple worlds overlap, fragments of memory surged through the creatures, synapses, memories that didn't belong together. A guardsman dying in a trench, choking on smoke. An ogrin lifting a boulder in a mining pit with simple, happy pride. A hive ganger screaming as a lasbolt pierced his spine. A child's laugh. The cold silence of death. The twisting, monstrous hunger of something that had once served chaos, all of it mashed into a single consciousness trying, desperately, to make sense of itself. Every muscle in the creature's body trembled as if the memories were inflicting physical pain, causing twitching spasms that shook the metal slab beneath it. The tech priest monitored the readings in alarm, watching as the creature's brain activity spiked into chaotic fluctuations. It wasn't just unstable, it was fracturing, forming and reforming identities in seconds. One moment it seemed calm, the next it was snarling, then whimpering, then staring blankly with the cold emptiness of a servitor. It was like watching a dying star flicker before collapsing into itself. The tech priest whispered Benharic command scripts, trying to stabilize the mind with auto-suggestive feedback patterns. But the machine spirits inside the creature's cranial implants began to behave erratically, as though overwhelmed by the raw torrent of human memories pouring through the synaptic mesh. One servo skull drifted closer, projecting a series of calming visual signals, but the creature suddenly jerked, recoiling as though the lights triggered some buried trauma. A memory of battle, perhaps, or interrogation lights. It snarled at the servo skull, Not with animal rage, but with a deeply human fear, an instinctive panic born from lives it didn't understand but felt trapped inside its own skull. The sound it made was garbled, cracking, the voice box straining to form words that never fully came. The fear twisted into anger, then confusion, then sorrow. Cycling so fast, the tech priest wondered if the mind would simply tear itself apart. He moved cautiously, adjusting a neural stabilizer implanted near the creature's brainstem, hoping to dampen some of the emotional overload. As he touched the device, the creature's eyes snapped to him, completely focused for the first time. For a moment, he felt as though a dozen ghosts were staring through those mismatched eyes, each one silently pleading or accusing. There was intelligence there, scattered and fractured, but undeniably aware. The tech priest felt a strange discomfort, an emotion he hadn't felt since before he traded most of his organic body for metal. Guilt. The memories in the creature did not settle. Instead, they layered themselves like broken shards, each movement triggering another flash of a life once lived. When its hand flexed, it remembered holding a weapon, and a child's hand, and strangling an enemy, and reaching for help as it died. When its legs shifted, it felt the weight of marching information, the strain of a mining tunnel collapse, the rush of sprinting away from gunfire. Every action connected to multiple lives, overlapping into a storm of unbearable mental noise. The tech priest continued adjusting the stabilizers, trying to map which parts of the creature's brain held which memories. It was impossible. Everything was tangled. There was no single consciousness to isolate, no central identity. What existed inside the creature was a battleground of memories fighting for dominance, a war that had no victor. Occasionally, one personality would overpower the others, causing the creature to suddenly still, almost serene, as though it had remembered something peaceful. But seconds later, another memory would trigger, pushing it into panic or confusion again. Its murmurs became clearer as its voice box slowly recalibrated. Words formed disjointed, painful, stumbling out as if dragged through multiple throats. Stop. No. Fire. Mother. Emperor. Hunger. Where? Why? Each word was spoken in a different tone, different pitch, like a crowd screaming through a single mouth. It wasn't a language. It was a stream of desperate attempts to express something, anything, that made sense. The tech priest approached with augmented calm, though his human thoughts churned. He had created something beyond his calculations. Not a simple corpse machine, not an obedient servitor. This was a cradle of souls, false and fragmented, violently awakened, and forced into one body. He wondered if the machine god would see this as heresy or innovation. He wondered if he himself had crossed a line that no tech priest should cross. But he also felt something else, a rising fascination. Unstable as they were, these minds held potential. They were windows into countless experiences stitched into a being that might one day learn how to control them. But for now, the creature thrashed again, gripped by another surge of conflicting memories. Its eyes filled with a terror that wasn't its own, but belonged to the lives glued together inside its skull, and not one of them understood what had been done to them. Powerful augmentations were never merely additions in the Adeptus Mechanicus. They were declarations of purpose, symbols of dominion over flesh. For the stitched-together monstrosity lying on the slab, these augmentations were the only reason its mismatched body could function at all. Every piece of flesh, every reconstructed organ, every reinforced bone needed support far beyond what biology alone could offer. The tech priest had spent countless cycles crafting the components, praying over them, etching each metallic part with tiny symbols meant to coax the machine spirits into cooperation. Every implant was chosen with intention, from the hydraulics in the legs to the armored plating fused directly into the muscle fibers. It was not simply a corpse revived. It was a battlefield instrument sculpted with cold precision. Along the creature's arms, thick cables ran beneath the skin, pulsing softly with each surge of power. The left arm was almost entirely mechanical, crafted from pieces salvaged from a decommissioned skittery Vanguard. Servos whirred quietly beneath the metal plating as the tech priest ran diagnostic scripts, watching the joints respond with surprising fluidity. The hand was an oversized claw-like structure made of ferrosteel, capable of crushing concrete. The right arm retained more flesh, though it had been reinforced with internal struts, bone grafts, and rotary actuators hidden under layers of stitched skin. Embedded along the forearm was an energy weapon, an integrated low-output plasma emitter, the kind typically mounted on drones or turret systems. Its coils glowed faintly as it recalibrated itself, humming with restrained danger. The chest was a fusion of biological and mechanical engineering. Organic ribs had been replaced with adamantium supports, each engraved with circuit-like runes. A reactor the size of a fist sat where a heart should be, wrapped in muscle and wires that intertwined like veins. This miniature power generator pumped energy instead of blood, sending electric life through the creature's network of implants. The tech priest had tuned it carefully, balancing its output to avoid overwhelming the organic tissues. It was a delicate relationship. Too much power and the flesh would burn. Too little and the grafted organs would fail. Occasional sparks danced along the creature's sternum as the system synchronized itself. Electrical pulses rhythmically, echoing through its reconstructed body. Inside the skull, augmetics played an even more important role. The brain was a patchwork like the body, but the amount of damage it had endured meant it needed mechanical reinforcement. Several neural implants had been drilled into the bone, connecting processor nodes to synaptic pathways. These implant nodes stabilized the chaotic thinking patterns as best they could, acting like traffic regulators for the storm of memories. Thin metallic filaments laced across the surface of the brain, glowing faintly with each synaptic surge. Deeper inside, a cortical stabilizer pulsed steadily, trying to dampen the emotional overload. The skull plating, crafted from ceramite, formed a protective shell around this delicate hybrid system, ensuring the creature's mind, unstable though it was, remained safe enough to keep functioning. Along its spine, a segmented mechanical ridge replaced much of the original vertebrae. Each segment clicked softly as power flowed through them, transferring energy through stabilizing rods that prevented the creature's mismatched musculature from tearing itself apart. The spinal mount also housed microreactors and coolant systems, venting faint streams of vapor through slits in the skin. When the creature moved, those vents released soft bursts of steam, giving it a constant aura of mechanical breath. Attached at various points were servoskulls, hovering around the creature like silent attendants. Though not physically attached, they were networked through a shared data link, feeding real-time information to implanted cogitators. They analyzed body temperature, muscle response, hydraulic pressure, and brain activity, sending corrections through wireless impulses. Their flickering green optics reflected across the creature's pale skin as they circled it, each one making minor adjustments or projecting hollow readings for the tech priest to observe. The legs were equally impressive. Built to withstand immense force, they combined organic muscle with massive hydraulic pistons. Each foot was reinforced to support the creature's considerable weight, making it capable of charging through walls or sprinting faster than any normal human. Embedded along the thighs were shock absorbers salvaged from combat servitors, reducing the risk of structural collapse during high-impact movements. When the tech priest activated a low-level motor test, the legs twitched violently, metal scraping against metal as the joints synchronized themselves. The creature's back housed a cluster of grafted mechanical limbs, mechadendrite appendages similar to those used by the tech priests themselves. These appendages lay dormant for now, curled like sleeping metallic serpents. But each one was capable of extending several meters and equipped with tools, plasma cutters, scalpel blades, grasping claws, and injectors filled with chemical stimulants. Once awakened, They would act almost like a second set of arms, reacting to threats instinctively. Even its senses had been augmented. The eyes contained multi-spectrum biolenses capable of seeing in the dark, detecting heat signatures, and interpreting machine signals in the environment. One eye was entirely mechanical, glowing faintly with a red targeting reticle. The other, though biological, had been modified with retina implants and data filters. The tech priest had even added an Auspex-connected auditory implant, enhancing the creature's hearing to pick up distant sounds or mechanical frequencies. All of these augmentations worked in uneven harmony, compensating for the chaotic flesh and unstable mind. They were meant to elevate the creature beyond mere existence, creating a soldier who could survive any battlefield, endure wounds that would kill a space marine, and strike with the force of a war machine. But as the tech priest watched the creature's body twitch under the weight of its augmentations, he couldn't shake the sense that he had built something that strained constantly between brilliance and collapse, something too powerful, too strange, and too unstable to ever be truly controlled. Escape was never meant to be part of the experiment. The chamber where the creature was created was buried far beneath the surface of the Forge world, secured by reinforced adamantium doors, guarded by automated turrets, and saturated with machine spirits programmed to alert the tech priest of even the smallest deviation. Yet nothing built by logic could fully anticipate the irrational force that fear brings to a mind, especially a mind stitched together from so many broken pieces. The creature's escape began not with violence, but with a moment of raw, overwhelming confusion that triggered a chain reaction no cogitator could have predicted. As the creature twitched on the slab, drowning in the storm of memories, it suddenly felt something unmistakably human, the instinct to flee. Whether the memory belonged to a cornered Hive ganger or a terrified soldier, it didn't matter. The sensation surged through its reconstructed nerves with such intensity that the body reacted before the tech priest realized what was happening. The restraints trembled violently as the creature's massive limbs strained. The first restraint snapped with a sharp metallic crack, sending fragments skittering across the floor. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. The tech priest paused mid-calculation, mechadendrites rising defensively as he tried to override the creature's motor impulses with harsh Benheric commands. But the implanted machine spirits were already overwhelmed by the chaotic signals from the creature's brain. Every memory-driven impulse fired simultaneously: fear, anger, desperation, the need to survive. The remaining restraints creaked as the creature pulled harder, its augmented muscles surging with unnatural power. The hydraulic lines along its arms bulged, whining under the strain. One more restraint snapped, then another, until finally the creature sat up with a sudden, violent motion that knocked over an entire tray of tools. The servo skulls whirled nervously, projecting warning sigils in frantic patterns. But the creature's vision blurred into a dizzying mosaic of colors and ghosts of memories. Somewhere in its mind, it remembered running from incoming artillery fire. Somewhere else, it recalled being hunted through alleys. Another piece of memory screamed at it to escape a collapsing tunnel. All these flashes merged together into one terrifying realization: it needed to move. Needed to get away from the cold room, the lights, the wires, the tech priest looming over it like a captor. When it slid off the table, the floor shook. The creature struggled to stand at first, its mechanically reinforced legs stuttering as its many neural pathways fought for dominance. But instinct found a rhythm, and soon the heavy limbs locked into place. The tech priest approached cautiously, holding a shock rod meant to disrupt the creature's implants. His voice was steady but edged with urgency as he repeated command phrases, trying to anchor the creature's mind. The creature's eyes flickered toward him, confused, frightened, momentarily compliant, until another surge of memories broke through the fragile calm. A flash of a torturer holding tools, a medic restraining a dying soldier, a chaos cultist standing over a bound prisoner. All these images superimposed themselves onto the tech priest, twisting his mechanical silhouette into something monstrous in the creature's unstable mind. With a sudden roar of pain and panic, the creature swatted the tech priest aside like a rag doll. Metal screeched as the mechadendrites sparked and curled reflexively. The tech priest crashed into a console, warning alarms blaring as sparks erupted in a shower of orange light. The creature staggered toward the only visible exit, the thick, rune-etched door at the far end of the chamber. It slammed its reinforced shoulder into the barrier, denting it on the first hit. Alarm klaxons activated as machine spirits howled warnings through the room. Automated turrets on the ceiling swiveled toward the creature, their targeting lasers dancing across its skin. The first burst of fire peppered its back with glowing impacts, sending bits of burned flesh and sparks flying. The creature screamed, its voice a mix of static and agony, then lunged at the door again with even greater force. The second impact cracked the doorframe. The third tore the metal hinges partially free. Hydraulic pistons in the creature's legs hissed furiously as they poured strength into one final charge. With a thunderous crash, the door tore open and slammed into the hallway beyond, twisting like tin foil. The creature stumbled out, half panicked, half blinded by flickering lights and the sudden change in temperature. The hallway ahead stretched like a maze of metal ribs, conduits, and shadows, and its unstable mind interpreted it not as a corridor, but as a path to freedom. As it lumbered forward, security systems activated in rapid succession. Shock fields burst to life in the walls, lashing out with arcs of electricity. Mechanical guardians, thin, spidery constructs, skittered toward the creature, firing tranquilizing darts and charged nets. But the creature's augmentations, combined with its panic-driven strength, allowed it to smash through barrier after barrier. Darts stuck into its skin, but only made its movements more erratic. Nets tangled around its arms, only to be torn apart by brute force. Eventually, the creature found a maintenance shaft, a vertical tunnel leading upward toward the upper levels. It grabbed the ladder with its reinforced hand and began climbing, sometimes missing rungs, sometimes tearing them free. Alarms continued to echo behind it, fading as it ascended. The closer it got to the surface, the stronger the memories of open spaces and fresh air became. A final hatch broke loose under its strength, spilling it into a large ventilation hub filled with dust, steam, and faint traces of outside wind. Then, for the first time, it saw light. Not lumen strips, not artificial beams, but the pale gleam of a polluted sky shining through a cracked grate. Something primal and instinctive surged within it. The creature slammed into the grate again and again until it burst outward, letting in a rush of cold air. Beyond the opening, far below, stretched the endless sprawl of a hive city, millions of stacked structures, smoke rising in pillars, the world alive with noise and movement, without hesitation. Still driven by a storm of memories, it could not understand. The creature leapt into the chaotic world below. The creature's appearance in the hive city was not subtle. When it fell from the broken ventilation grate high above, it crashed through rusted scaffolding, smashed into a tangle of cables, then hit an abandoned transport unit with enough force to crumple the vehicle like soft metal. The noise echoed through the narrow streets like a localized explosion, startling workers, scaring off groups of hivers who had been loitering nearby, and sending flocks of servo gulls scattering into the air. Smoke and dust billowed upward from the impact zone as the creature slowly pushed itself upright, its mechanical limbs whining with overexertion. Conflicting memories surged through its unstable mind, each one interpreting the new environment in a different way. One memory insisted this was a battlefield. Another said it was home. A third screamed warning after warning, insisting danger hid behind every shadow. These clashing impressions made its breathing ragged and its movements confused. The first to approach were two scavengers, who had been digging through scrap piles for parts. They crept toward the ruined transport, thinking perhaps some valuable machine had fallen from the upper city levels. But when they saw the towering shape rise from the debris, they froze in utter horror. The creature was massive, stitched from flesh and metal, its limbs wrapped in cables, its back venting soft plumes of steam. One of its eyes glowed with a mechanical red gleam, scanning the area in jittery arcs. The other eye twitched, unable to settle on a single point, because too many memories were fighting over what it should be seeing. The scavengers ran without looking back, tripping over themselves in panic as they shouted warnings to anyone who could hear. Their screams drew others. Doors slammed shut. Children were yanked indoors. A patrol of local enforcers, armed with shock mauls and short-barreled autoguns, advanced cautiously, unsure what kind of mutant or rogue servitor they were dealing with. The creature turned toward their voices, confused and trembling. Its neural implants tried desperately to categorize the approaching figure's memories, told it they were enemies, allies, strangers, witnesses, threats. Its skin prickled with a dozen competing instincts. Some told it to run. Some told it to fight. Others whispered ancient human urges for help, shelter, warmth. The cacophony of impulses made it sway on its feet, clutching its head with its oversized, reinforced hand. The enforcers shouted orders for it to stand down, their voices amplified by cracked vox speakers. But the creature didn't understand. The words blurred together, mixing with echoes of memories unrelated to the present moment. One of the enforcers made the mistake of stepping too close, thinking perhaps the monster was injured or malfunctioning. He reached out with his maul raised defensively. The sight of a weapon triggered something in the creature's fractured mind, a memory of being beaten, restrained, tortured, killed. The terror came suddenly and violently. With a roar of raw anguish, the creature swung its metal arm, sending the enforcer flying into a wall with bone-breaking force. The others immediately opened fire. Rounds struck the creature's chest, arms, and shoulders, sparking off metal plating and tearing into the patches of exposed flesh. But pain meant nothing to a body that had already died once. It reacted on instinct, charging forward with terrifying speed. Mechanical pistons in its legs fired in rapid bursts, launching it like a living battering ram. It crashed into the enforcers, scattering them like ragdolls, roaring with a voice distorted by broken vocal cords. Some hivers watched from cracked windows, unable to look away. They had seen mutants, servitors gone rogue, even escaped xeno-creatures in the past, but nothing as unnatural as this. It moved like a wounded animal and a war machine at the same time, switching between panic, rage, and desperate confusion with every few steps. The creature fled deeper into the Hive city, crashing through laundry lines, smashing through makeshift doors, vaulting over piles of scrap with unnatural agility driven by its augmentations. Its mind screamed with overlapping memories of running from ambushes, of charging into battles, of sprinting for help, of fleeing from executioners. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every noise sounded like an attack. It crashed into a marketplace, overturning stalls and scattering terrified civilians. Vendors abandoned their goods, children screamed. Alarms rang throughout the sector. The smell of food mixed with the acrid scent of smoke and machine oil pouring off the creature's body. More law enforcement units responded. This time with heavier equipment, riot shields, suppression units, electrotraps. A suppression drone fired a net of energized filaments, which wrapped around the creature's torso and arms. For a moment, it convulsed, electricity rippling across its implants. One of the memories in its mind recognized this pain, recalling a similar moment from a completely different life. That memory screamed inside its skull, urging it to survive. With a guttural cry, it tore the net apart, sending burnt fragments flying. The nearby officers watched in disbelief as the creature ripped free from restraints that should have incapacitated a scout marine. Small group of civilians remained trapped behind an overturned cart, frozen in fear as the creature staggered near them. It towered over them, twitching as memories wrestled for dominance. One part of its fragmented mind saw them as hostages, another as children from its past life, another as enemies hiding weapons. It reached out with a trembling, shaking hand. The smallest child whimpered. For a heartbeat, the creature hesitated, staring at its own hand as if it didn't recognize it. A flicker of gentleness surfaced, some ancient instinct to protect overriding the chaos. But then torches ignited nearby. The sound of heavy boots echoed. Reinforcements. The creature flinched so violently that the ground shook. Fear drowned whatever gentleness had surfaced. It turned, roared, and barreled through an outer wall of the marketplace, bursting into yet another maze-like section of the Hive. By the time night fell, rumors had already spread. A monster stitched from corpses, a machine animated by ghosts, a forbidden experiment of the Mechanicus, a demon in metal flesh. But none of them understood that the creature itself was just as terrified of the world as the world was of it. The creature moved through the Mechanicus facility with a heavy, uneven gait, its reconstructed limbs dragging against the steel floor and leaving long, scraping marks that echoed through the cavernous hallways like cries for help. No one had told it what it was, where it came from, or what purpose it served. It only understood pain in the metal plates bolted into its bones, pain in the tubes stitched beneath its skin, pain in the strange energy pulsing through its chest like a second artificial heartbeat. Every step felt like a conflict between the body it had been given and the mind struggling to understand why it existed at all. Sometimes it felt something close to memory, whispers of a life that wasn't this one, a name on the edge of thought, a feeling of the wind somewhere far from steel corridors. But every time it tried to grasp those memories, the electric pulses inside its skull forced them away. Servitors and adepts watched from a distance, afraid to come too close even though they were told the creation was stable. It didn't know the meaning of the word. Nothing about it felt stable. Inside the creature's mind, two voices seemed to argue, one cold and machine-like, insisting obedience and silence, and the other soft human, trembling with confusion and anger. The clash between them made its vision blur and its movements jerk unpredictably. It would lift its hands and stare at them, the mismatched fingers twitching with frustration. Some were organic, though sewn back on with crimson thread, while others were mechanical constructs shaped for strength rather than precision. The contrast made the creature feel incomplete, like a broken puzzle forced together by someone who didn't care if the pieces fit. Sometimes it wandered toward the viewing ports where the red-robed priests observed it. Their glowing cybernetic eyes followed its every move. It could sense their distrust, their fear, their fascination. It wanted to ask them something. Why am I alive? But the words never formed. The voice inside that once knew how to speak was drowned out by the cold machine logic, telling it that speech was unnecessary. It slammed its fist against the glass one day, not to harm them, but because the pressure building inside its chest had nowhere else to go. The glass cracked and alarms blared throughout the chamber. For a moment, the creature froze, horrified by what it had done. It backed away, curling into itself, trembling like a frightened animal. That fear slowly twisted into anger as the days passed. It noticed how they treated it like some malfunctioning device rather than a living being. They brought tools instead of comfort, programming commands instead of explanations. When it resisted an implant session, the Magos activated the pain circuits wired into its spine, forcing it to kneel while electricity danced through its nerves. During those moments, the creature could feel its humanity slipping further away, like sand falling through fingers. It wanted to scream, but the machine voice held its throat closed. Yet in the deepest part of its mind, something human still survived. It remembered warmth, a hand holding its own, a face speaking softly, a sense of belonging. Those memories became a refuge, tiny sparks pushing back against the cold machinery, reshaping its identity. When the tech priests left it alone in the dark, it would sit for hours trying to piece the fragments together. It didn't know who those memories belonged to, but every time it felt them, the hole inside its chest tightened with longing. It wished, more than anything, to understand why they were taken from it. One night, while the facility slept, the creature overheard two adepts whispering outside its chamber. They spoke of the experiment's instability and the possibility of dismantling it for parts if progress remained slow. The words sliced through the creature like a blade. Dismantle, parts. It realized then that to them, it wasn't a person at all. It wasn't even a failed soldier or a damaged servitor. It was an object, something they believed they had the right to cut up and discard. That realization ignited something inside. A surge of emotion so powerful that even the machine logic faltered. Rage mixed with fear and both fused with desperation. The creature stood up, trembling, as memories crashed over it like waves. It remembered running across grass. It remembered laughter. It remembered a voice calling its name, still blurry, but growing clearer with each passing second. And for the first time, it understood that it wanted to live on its own terms. Not as a tool, not as a project, but as a being with a past and a future. The walls felt smaller than ever as the creature pushed its hands against them, feeling the vibrations of machinery humming throughout the complex. It didn't know what awaited beyond this place, or whether the world outside would be any kinder, but it knew it couldn't stay. The human voice in its mind grew louder, encouraging it, guiding it, reminding it that survival was possible, that identity could be reclaimed. The cold machine voice tried to override it, insisting compliance. But the creature finally understood something essential. It didn't have to obey, and that first moment of choice, small as it was, felt like the closest thing to freedom it had ever experienced. The Adeptus Mechanicus facility had grown used to strange noises, humming engines, clanking servitors, the whispered binary cant of red-robed priests. But on the night the creature escaped, the sound that rolled through the steel corridors was unlike anything they had heard before. It was not mechanical, not predictable, not sterile. It was a roar filled with confusion, pain, and a raw animal desperation that made even the senior tech priests freeze mid-chant. Lights flickered across the complex as security servitors scrambled to respond, their heavy steps pounding in unison, but the creature had already slipped into the deeper levels, navigating the shadows with an instinct it didn't know it possessed. Something in its muscles remembered how to move when hunted. Something in its bones remembered fear. The hallways twisted like a maze, lined with pipes pumping chemical vapors and steam that clouded its vision. The creature pressed its mismatched hand against the wall, feeling the bass thrum of generators and the cold vibration of metal. As it moved, stray flashes of memory surged through its mind, sunlight on skin, the scent of rain, the sound of laughter. These memories didn't belong in a place of oil and steel. They made the creature question the very fabric of what it had become. Were these echoes of a life it once lived? Or were they fragments planted by accident when old tissue and new circuits were fused together? It didn't know, but it clung to them like a lifeline. Voices carried through the darkness as Mechanicus personnel attempted to track it. Binary bursts echoed sharply, instructing patrols to converge on level 9. The creature ducked into a maintenance tunnel, too narrow for standard servitors. It crawled through the confined space, metal scraping against metal. The tunnel smelled of rust and coolant, mixing into a bitter sting in its throat. As it moved, it felt the weight of its body-stitched flesh pulling against metal plates, bone grinding where it had been replaced with alloy rods. Every movement was a reminder of the unnatural existence forced upon it. When it emerged from the tunnel, it found itself in a vast chamber stacked with rows of deactivated constructs. Their empty eye sockets stared into nothingness, like an audience of silent witnesses. Some were incomplete, limbs missing, wires spilling like dried veins. The creature paused, studying them as a strange feeling washed over it, empathy perhaps, or sorrow. These husks were what it feared becoming, objects without identity, stripped of choice. It walked among them slowly, dragging its fingers across their cold frames. In their stillness, it saw its own possible future, and the thought terrified it. Heavy footsteps sounded from the far doorway, and the creature tensed. Searchlights swept across the chamber as Tech Guard units entered, their metallic voices reciting pursuit protocols. The creature's breathing quickened. It could feel the machine logic inside its skull trying to activate subroutines for surrender. But something deeper resisted. That buried human voice, faint but growing stronger, told it to fight, to move, to choose its own path. It slipped behind the stacks of constructs, moving with surprising agility for its mismatched body. As the guards spread out, the creature felt a sudden jolt in its spine. An implant had activated, attempting to shut down its motor functions. The pain was instant and overwhelming, sending it crashing to its knees. Its vision blurred, swimming with red fractals as the Mechanicus programming tried to regain control. But amid the pain, the human memories burst through again, hands reaching for it, pulling it forward, urging it to survive. Desperation surged, and with a guttural cry, the creature slammed its fist against the floor. The force overloaded the malfunctioning circuitry for a moment, giving it a chance to push itself upright again. The guards heard the noise and converged. The creature darted away, stumbling at first, then regaining balance as instinct took over. It grabbed the arm of a broken construct and yanked it free with unnatural strength. When a guard rounded the corner, it swung. Metal collided with metal in a brutal clang, sending sparks flying. The guard fell, its optics shattered. The creature froze for a moment, horrified by what it had done. It hadn't wanted to hurt anyone, it had only wanted to escape. But survival left little room for hesitation. The remaining guards charged, and chaos erupted through the chamber. The creature moved with a mixture of fear-driven instinct and raw power, dodging blasts and knocking aside attackers. Every strike sent pain through its body, as if its organic and synthetic parts were fighting each other with every motion. The sounds of battle echoed through the facility, growing louder until alarms began to wail across the entire complex. Somewhere above the noise, a senior tech priest issued orders to capture the creature intact. They spoke of its psychological instability, its malfunctioning memory fragments, its unexpected emotional responses. But the creature no longer listened. Words like instability and malfunction meant nothing to it now. What mattered was the sensation building inside its chest, fear mixed with determination. The spark of something resembling hope. It ran through the chamber doors. Its breathing ragged, its entire body trembling. It didn't know where the exit was, or what waited outside. It only knew that staying meant being torn apart and rebuilt again and again until nothing human remained. As it moved deeper into the facility's lower levels, the air grew colder, the lights dimmer, and the faint sound of wind filtered through distant vents. Freedom somewhere beyond these metallic walls felt close enough to touch, even if it didn't yet understand what that freedom would mean for something like it. The freezing tunnels beneath the Mechanicus complex were far older than the chambers above, carved long before the current priests had taken over. Their walls were rough stone instead of metal, marked by faded sigils and rusted pipes that dripped rhythmically, forming puddles that reflected the dim emergency lights flickering overhead. The creature's breath formed small clouds in the cold air as it moved forward, its heavy footsteps echoing through the narrow corridors. It didn't know where the path led, but the distant hum of the upper facility was fading behind it, replaced by an eerie quiet that felt almost alive. For the first time since it had awakened on a metal slab, the creature felt no voices shouting commands in its mind, no mechanical pulses forcing obedience. Only the sound of its own breathing, uneven and ragged. Yet even in the silence, it sensed something else lingering in the darkness. As it walked deeper, the tunnel seemed to shift from industrial to ancient, as though it were crossing from one world to another. Strange metallic cables hung like vines from the ceiling, and some of them sparked faintly when its body brushed against them, illuminating the chamber for brief moments. In those flashes, the creature saw carvings etched into the stone, twisting shapes, humanoid but wrong, their proportions distorted, their faces stretched in expressions of anguish. It didn't know why, but looking at them stirred something inside it, a faint recognition, almost like déjà vu. As if the pain carved into the walls resonated with the pain inside its own mismatched body, the ground sloped downward until it reached a cavern-like expanse. Massive pillars supported the ceiling, wrapped in chains that rattled despite the still air. At the center of the room sat a large machinery shrine, half buried in dust, its gears frozen in time. Red candles burned around it, though there were no signs of anyone nearby. The flames flickered in a pattern that felt almost intentional. The creature approached cautiously, each step echoing across the cavern. When it reached the shrine, it extended a trembling hand and touched the cold surface. Instantly, visions flashed through its mind, images of experiments. Bodies stitched together, sparks flying as bolts were driven into bone. Priests chanting while a heart was forced to beat inside an unwilling host. The creature staggered back, clutching its head as the memories collided with its thoughts. These were not its own memories. They belonged to others, those who came before. Failed creations, broken prototypes, lives assembled from corpses and machines, tested for endurance until their minds shattered. It saw them thrown onto conveyor belts, reclaimed for parts, their screams drowned out by machinery. The visions made the creature's chest tighten with a sensation it hadn't understood before, rage mixed with grief. A sorrow so deep it felt like its very core was cracking as the visions faded. It became aware of faint scuttling beneath the floor. Something moved behind the walls, something that followed its presence. It felt dozens of small, sharp gazes watching. The creature turned slowly, scanning the shadows where the candlelight didn't reach. A distant clatter echoed through the cavern, followed by a low metallic groan. Something was awakening, something ancient that had been dormant for years. The creature felt the hair rise on its skin, human instinct screaming that it was not alone. From a tunnel opposite where it had entered, a shape emerged, dragging itself into the candlelight. It wasn't fully machine nor fully flesh like the creature itself, but its form was incomplete, missing entire sections of its torso, with wires spilling out like exposed nerves. Its single eye glowed faintly, flickering as though struggling to stay lit. It crawled toward the creature, emitting a sound somewhere between a mechanical whine and a human sob. The creature froze, unsure whether to approach or retreat. But something in the broken construct's movements felt familiar, almost kin-like. As it reached the creature's feet, it extended a shaking limb, trying to grasp its ankle, not in threat but in plea. The creature knelt slowly, its joints grinding as metal rubbed against metal. It placed its hand on the broken construct's head, feeling the trembling vibrations beneath its palm. The construct's eye flickered brighter for a moment, as if responding to the touch. A faint whisper resonated through the cavern, words not spoken aloud, but carried through some forgotten data stream or psychic imprint. The creature couldn't make out the full meaning, but it felt the intent: sorrow, warning, suffering. Before it could react, the construct's light dimmed entirely, and its frame collapsed into a lifeless heap. Sudden booming footsteps rumbled down the tunnel the creature had originally come from. The Mechanicus had found another route. It could hear them chanting binary, their metallic voices echoing like a swarm of insects. Panic surged through its chest as the cavern shook with their approaching machines. It looked at the fallen construct, then at the shrine, then at the narrow tunnels leading deeper underground. Instinct pulled it forward. Whatever lay ahead, whatever secrets these forgotten halls hid felt safer than returning to the priests who had built it. The human side of its mind urged it to run, to survive, to protect the faint spark of identity it had reclaimed. The creature turned away from the heavy footsteps and plunged deeper into the darkness, not knowing what waited ahead, but knowing it could never go back. The tunnels grew narrower as the creature pushed deeper into the forgotten depths, the stone walls slowly giving way to a strange blend of rock and metal. Veins of glowing circuitry pulsed faintly beneath the surface, weaving like roots of some ancient machine tree. The light they emitted was dim, but enough to see the path ahead, a spiraling descent that felt too deliberate to be natural. Every few steps the creature felt a faint vibration in its feet, as though something beneath the ground was breathing, slow and mechanical. It didn't know whether the sensation comforted or frightened it, only that the world here felt different from the Mechanicus facility above, colder, older, as if this place had been hidden for a reason. The air thickened with dust and the scent of old metal. The creature's lungs struggled, wheezing softly, the organic parts of its body fighting the cold while its mechanical parts clicked and whirred, compensating for the strain. The imbalance inside it, half designed, half remembered, made every breath feel like a negotiation. Yet for the first time the creature felt it was walking towards something rather than running from something. It didn't know what waited at the end of the spiral, but the faint hum in the walls seemed to call to it, urging it forward like a whisper only it could hear. When the tunnel finally widened, it opened into a vast chamber that looked like an entirely different world. Towering spires of machinery rose from the ground like jagged black trees, their surfaces covered in runes that glowed with shifting colors. Pools of chemical liquid reflected the eerie lights, casting distorted shapes across the ceiling. In the very center stood a colossal cylindrical structure, half organic and half mechanical, throbbing like a beating heart. The creature stopped at the threshold, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the place. It didn't know what it was looking at, some forgotten lab, an ancient machine god shrine, or a tomb for failed experiments. But something inside the chamber resonated with the core of its being. As it stepped forward, the ground trembled slightly, and the pulsating structure shifted, as though sensing its presence. The creature felt a surge of warmth in its chest, like an invisible hand brushing against a long-hidden wound. It moved closer, drawn by a force it didn't understand. When it reached the base of the structure, the throbbing intensified, and tiny mechanical tendrils snaked out from cracks in the metal, brushing against its skin. They didn't restrain it, rather, they explored it, mapping the shape of its body, tracing the seams where flesh met steel. Each touch sent waves of sensation through its nervous system, awakening memories it had buried or forgotten. Suddenly, the chamber filled with whispers, soft, overlapping voices like a chorus speaking in dozens of languages at once. They weren't real voices but echoes, data fragments vibrating in the air. The creature closed its eyes as the whispers flowed into its mind, showing visions of other creations, beings stitched together from corpses and circuitry just like it. Some had lived only minutes before collapsing. Others had roamed these chambers before being reclaimed by the priests above. It saw their lives, their pain, their confusion, their desperate struggle to understand themselves. Their memories intertwined with its own until the creature felt it could no longer distinguish where it ended, and they began. It sank to its knees, overwhelmed. The visions did not stop. They showed a time when this chamber had been full of light and activity, filled with priests who believed they were redefining life itself. They had spoken of building the perfect synthesis of man and machine, creating beings that could rival even the space marines in strength and endurance. But pride had blinded them. Their creations screamed in agony, their minds unable to endure the conflict between human emotion and forced machine logic. The priests had locked the failures below, sealing them in darkness, pretending the project had never existed. The creature let out a low, trembling sound. These were its ancestors, not by blood, but by creation. It had inherited their pain, their fractured memories, their longing to be more than tools. It understood now why the Mechanicus above feared it. It was not merely unstable, it was unpredictable, capable of becoming something they couldn't control or replicate. It felt a warmth spread through its chest, not from the chamber, but from within. A fragile but undeniable sense of identity. For the first time, it felt less like a mistake and more like a continuation, a living remnant of a forgotten dream, the structure before it pulsed again, and a panel slowly unfolded, revealing a glowing core. The creature felt its pulse synchronize with the thrum of that core, as though inviting it to touch. With a shaking hand, it reached out and pressed its palm against the light. A surge of energy rushed through its body, not painful but empowering. Circuits lit beneath its skin, old implants reactivated, and the mechanical parts of its body aligned themselves with a new purpose. The human memories remained warm, painful, real, but now they stood beside something new, something clearer. A sense of will. The chamber quieted, the whispers fading into a soft hum. The creature rose slowly, no longer trembling, no longer unsure. Its body was still a patchwork of flesh and metal, still scarred and incomplete, but it felt a coherence inside it that hadn't existed before. It knew the Mechanicus would follow its trail soon, driven by fear and obsession. But it also knew something else, something powerful. It was no longer a runaway experiment. No longer a mistake stumbling through halls in confusion. Here in the forgotten depths, surrounded by the echoes of those who came before, it had found the beginning of something like purpose. The creature began its ascent through the tunnels with a steadiness it had never felt before, its mismatched limbs moving with a strange but confident rhythm. The faint glow from the ancient machinery behind it slowly faded as it climbed toward the surface, leaving only darkness and the echo of its own steps. Yet even in that darkness, it no longer felt alone. The memories of the prototypes that had come before their fear, their rage, their faint flickers of humanity lingered in the deepest corners of its mind. They were not voices, not commands, but reminders. For the first time, those memories did not confuse it or tear at its mind. They felt like a weight it could carry, a legacy it understood. With each step, it realized that it had not escaped the Mechanicus to hide or run forever. It had escaped because something inside it insisted it deserved more than a life spent on an operating slab. The tunnels narrowed, again as it reached a branching passage. The air was warmer here, tinged with the scent of oil and recycled oxygen. Far above, faint vibrations hummed a different rhythm from the ancient chambers below. It knew the Mechanicus facility was not far. It could almost picture the priests walking in rigid precision, their metal feet clicking on metal floors, their chanting echoing through the halls. It remembered being one of their creations, an object to be tuned and calibrated, something to be monitored rather than understood. The thought stirred something sharp inside it, like a flame ignited by the friction of memory. It moved through the tunnel cautiously, its senses alert. The human part of its mind felt fear at returning so close to the facility, while the mechanical part calculated risks with cold precision. That conflict had once torn it apart, but now the two sides seemed to communicate. The organic instincts warned of danger. The synthetic logic filtered possible outcomes. Not harmony, but cooperation born of necessity. It felt strange but stabilizing. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a maintenance shaft. A ladder stretched upward toward a circular hatch. The creature placed its hand on the rung, feeling its weight shift as metal scraped against metal beneath its skin. It climbed, each movement steady despite the occasional twitch from loose wiring under its shoulder plates. When it reached the top, it pressed an ear against the hatch, listening. At first, nothing. Then faint metallic steps. A servitor nearby. It held its breath, waiting. The sound grew distant. Carefully, quietly, it pushed the hatch open and emerged into a dimly lit maintenance chamber. Pipes hissed overhead, and wall-mounted cogitators flickered with scrolling data. The chamber felt cold and sterile, a sharp contrast to the ancient warmth of the underground machine shrine. The creature stepped forward, its heavy feet leaving faint impressions in dust. It could see security-picked recorders turning slowly, but their lenses were cracked and inactive. The lower facilities had been abandoned long ago. This realization gave the creature a moment of small, unexpected relief. It was not yet discovered. But as it moved deeper into the chamber, the distant sound of a klaxon reached its ears, a low, vibrating tone that echoed down the hallways. The Mechanicus had realized something was wrong. Perhaps they had found the broken constructs in the cavern. Perhaps they had detected the power spike when the creature touched the core. Either way, they were coming. The creature quickened its pace, slipping through another corridor and climbing a staircase that led up into a larger complex. Every step was a race against time, against the inevitability of being cornered again. When it reached the upper level, the creature found itself in a vast hall filled with machinery rows. Giant reactors emitted a low hum, and red warning lights flashed on distant consoles. Servitors marched in formation like silent soldiers, carrying data slates and tools. None noticed the creature yet. Their tasks were rigid, their programming limited. The creature stayed low, moving between stacks of crates and dormant equipment. It felt its heart pounding, not the mechanical pump installed in its chest, but the remnants of a human heart that still beat within all the metal. That heartbeat was a reminder of why it was here, why it needed to keep moving forward. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the hall, cold and mechanical. A senior Magos issued orders in binary, his tone sharp. Patrol units deployed. Search teams activated. The creature's presence was no longer an unknown anomaly, it was considered a threat. The tech priests did not fear its power. They feared its unpredictability, its refusal to remain a controllable experiment. The creature felt a surge of something like bitterness. To them, its awakening was nothing more than a malfunction. A squad of skittery marched into the hall, their glowing visors scanning the shadows. The creature ducked behind a column as the soldiers passed, their steps synchronized, their rifles twitching with motion-sensing precision. For a moment, it wondered if it should confront them, prove that it was something more than a runaway monster. But the faint human instinct whispered sharply, pushing it back into the darkness. It was not ready. It was learning what it meant to choose its actions rather than be programmed into them. And right now, survival was the choice it could make. As the skittery moved away, the creature spotted a service corridor leading toward the facility's exterior gates. The door was partially open. A faint gust of cold night air swept through, carrying the scent of ash and distant fires, real air, not recycled facility oxygen. The creature moved toward that scent with cautious urgency, each step deliberate, each movement silent. Its body ached with every motion, but the ache felt strangely motivating rather than crippling. A reminder that it was alive in its own fractured way. When it reached the door, it paused, placing a hand against the frame. Beyond lay a world it had never seen, a world it had only glimpsed in fragmented memories, sky, wind, open space. It did not know what dangers waited outside, nor what it could become once it stepped into that world. But it knew one undeniable truth burning inside its chest, a truth stitched from pain, memory, and newfound will.